have Dr. Addas here, a professor of digital technology at Smith School of Business at Queen's University. Dr. Addas, can you tell us a bit about your background and what drew you to the field of data security?
Well, my name is Shamel Addas, and I'm originally from Egypt, and I've immigrated to Canada about 22 years ago now, and I've always been fascinated by the field of privacy and security, whether it's physical security or online security. So that's right now it's one of my streams of research. I'd like to look at mostly at behavioral aspects of security, because time and time again research shows that it's not really the security problems are most of the time not technical. It's really our human behaviors that causes security vulnerabilities. So because a lot of my research touches upon the intersection of technology and psychology, it's only natural that I've become drawn to this line of research to really understand why we fall prey to security problems and what we can do about it also as individuals.
Why is data privacy important? Why should people care about data privacy at all?
Well, because our day-to-day life is conducted online now, almost 100%. It's hard to think of any task, whether it's personal or work-related or social, that is not done by technology. And when it comes to conducting your life over technology, then online privacy and online security become issues. Right? There's a famous saying that the most secure computer is the one that's buried 30 feet underground, right? But once you have internet connectivity, then all kinds of things can happen in the background because you don't see it, right? You're connected to the internet, you're talking with a friend or doing Zoom or conducting a task online, but there's so much that's hidden from you that can jeopardize your privacy and security online.
And if it's the government or third-party trackers or whoever has that data, why should I be concerned about them having that data?
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem comes from the fact that there is this unidentified entity that might be involved in using your information online. So a lot of the privacy research is based on the notion of trust. Right? When you engage in any interaction with another entity, whether it's a person or an organization, there's someone you might trust or not. But the problem with online interactions is that oftentimes that entity is unidentified. So let me give you an example. You're browsing a website. Let's say you go to B.Sc or CNN. You're not just interacting with BBC or CNN. There's a lot of other entities that might be involved in tracking information. So third-party trackers is what we call, for instance, these entities. Similarly, when you interact with Facebook or Google, there's third parties that you're unaware of that might have access to your information, and your data might actually get commercialized and sold to these third parties. So the problem with this is that it's hard to really understand what's going on and to approve it or not, because you don't know who has access to your information. So there's no one to trust really, other than just trusting the internet, which is this vague or obscure concept. So that's where I think a lot of the behavioral issues come about when it comes to online privacy.
I'm just a regular person living in this world. Why should I care? It doesn't matter. If they have that information, nothing bad is going to happen to me. Is that a valid point?
Well, sure. It's a valid point as long as the person making the point is consciously thinking about the costs of benefits of his or her interactions, right? So as long as you know what you're giving up by connecting to a website or subscribing to a service, let's say, and you can weigh the costs and benefits, yes, it's very valid to say, you know what, I don't really care. I'm giving up some information. It's not really sensitive credit card information. And in return, I'm getting a service that it's going to be useful for me. The problem, though, is that a lot of times this, what we call the privacy calculus, this calculated rational decision making is not in the picture. So people just, either don't think about it, or they rely on biases or heuristics, or in other cases, and which is actually what we found in our research, they just become conditioned to this concept, which is in psychology is called learned helplessness. They just, learn to be pessimistic. They learn that there's nothing they can do about controlling the privacy of the information, so they might as well just give up, and who cares? So it really depends on the mindset and whether you accept the risks and benefits, or you're aware of the risks and benefit or not.
Why don't people protect their online privacy, even when they have the tools to do so?
There's two dominant reasons. One of them is that they don't want to. They can, but they don't want to because they're well aware of the costs and benefits. But I would say, if I had to guess, there's probably a minority of people who go that route because, as I said, there's so many biases that go into that story. The more common explanation is this notion of learned helplessness, is that they don't do anything about it, even though they have the tools to do something about it, because they just don't see, they become conditioned to the idea that there's whatever you do, it's not going to work. There's always going to be a route to compromising their information. Even if I block this particular interaction right now, there's so many different ways by which my information can become used or accessed or compromised. So they just give up.
How does it relate to data and privacy concerns?
Well, the concept of learned helplessness is very old. So it emerged in research in the 1960s. Martin Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania is a key researcher behind this series of experiments. And interestingly, it was about dogs in the beginning. So there was a series of experiments in which they showed that dogs who were subjected to small electric shocks became conditioned to doing nothing about these shocks, even though in the next phase of the experiment, they could easily escape those shocks. So this research at the time was conducted with animals. Unfortunately, at the time, they did these kind of experiments with animals. But since then, it's been extended with humans and it's been tested in many different contexts. And it's the same thing. So when it comes to applying this concept to privacy and security, is that people become conditioned to learned helplessness. So if someone experiences, let's say, an identity theft, or the computers become compromised, or a Trojan, or ransomware, or what have you, that can lead to this conditioned effect that they say, well, you know what, it's going to happen again. If it happened once, it can happen again. But the interesting thing is that you don't have to experience something negative yourself. So just by hearing in the media, for instance, that all of these stories about big organizational websites that get hacked and credit card information that gets leaked, governments observing the citizens through the smartphones and all kinds of things, they didn't happen to you personally, contribute to conditioning people to this mental state of learned helplessness. They just, as I said, they just give up. They say, well, this is something that's so broad, it's so stable, it's so global, it can happen in so many different shapes and forms and ways that no matter what I do, it's not going to make a difference. There's a million ways online by which information can be leaked. So why should I bother? I just learn to accept it and I just move on.
What is your advice for Canadians who are reluctant to protect themselves, either through learned helplessness or for any other reason?
Well, it's interesting because we did a small experiment a while back, and we it was in the context of party tracking. So we met with participants in the study, and we educated them about third-party tracking. Some of them didn't know what that was. And we gave them the tools that they can control third-party tracking. So there are tools out there, for instance, like browser add-ins that you can install, and they can help you to track the trackers. So it's kind of like spying on the spies. But the interesting thing is that a lot of the participants, even though they appreciated the software and they liked it, they ended up not using it, which then in follow-up interviews, we've identified this notion of learned helplessness, is that he said, well, it's just one tool I have. I can, block some of the information, but it's going to happen in so many other ways. So that's, I would say, that's one of the tools. It's not the only one, but that's one of the available quick fixes. At least gives you insight about what's going on is these browser add-ins. There's a number of them out there. A lot of them are freely available. There's Ghostery, there's Privacy Badger, there's Disconnect, and a bunch of other tools as well. And what they do essentially is that when you're browsing from website to website, they look at which entities are tracking you and building like a complete profile tracking you across these websites, and they can then show you who's tracking you, and they can also block ads. Some of them focus on ads, others focus on any kind of organization or entity or aggregator that tracks you across sites. So that's one thing. I would say more importantly, though, is this notion of switching. It's a mental state, switching from this state of learned helplessness to a state in which you are conscious that something's going on with your information potentially. And, going back to this idea of the privacy calculus, weighing the costs and benefits. If you're fine with it, so be it. But I'm aware that my information is being tracked when I visit these 5 websites, for instance, right? Another thing which I often advise is for Canadians to ask, pick up the phone, send an email, ask the organization that you're interacting with. If you sign up to their service, ask them 5 questions. What data is being tracked about me? How are you using this data? Who else has access to this data? From your business partners, let's say. How are they using this data? And finally, what can I do about it if I don't want to share my personal data? Do I have the possibility of asking for my data not to be tracked? And if so, then what are the consequences of that? So I think being in a more proactive mode and understanding that you can control some things, you can ask questions definitely, is also extremely important. Now, obviously, the other thing is also top-down. So I talked about bottom-up approaches, what you can do as a Canadian, but there's also top-down approaches, regulation, government regulation. Some companies are becoming much more aware, like Apple now, for instance, gives users this feature of asking apps not to track, right? Which is very easy on your iPhone. You can simply ask the app not to track you, and you're not going to face any negative consequences. You're still going to be able to use the app. So I think a lot more organizations need to give this flexibility and control to users.
Are there any, free tools or resources that you like the best or that you use personally?
I used to love a tool it was developed by Mozilla, and unfortunately it's no longer available. It was called Collusion, and then the other name was given to it was Lightbeam. And I liked it because it gave you like this visual network, and it showed you actually every organization that's tracking you, and as it's tracking you across different websites. So you could actually see it in a really cool network diagram. So this is no longer available. The one I like to use nowadays is Privacy Badger, and mostly because it's unlike many of the other tools that focus just on ads. It doesn't care about ads. Ads is just one way of third-party trackers one of the main use cases, let's say, for third-party tracking, but it's not the only one. So it just basically says, all right, so we're going to count how many different websites each entity is tracking you on, and if it's 3 plus, then it blocks it, or it alerts you and tells you, hey, this website or aggregator or entity is tracking you on 5 websites, and then you can control whether to block it or to allow it. So that gives you a lot of user control that I like. So I like using Privacy Badger.
We kind of touched on, who should, you talked about, different businesses, individual level, corporations. Who would you say is most vulnerable to privacy breaches, and why?
I think, like from a psychological perspective, I think people who are most vulnerable to privacy breaches are the same people who tend to rely more on heuristics and shortcuts and rules of thumb for decision making. So what we call in psychology the system 1 as opposed to system 2. So same people who would fall prey to fake news, for instance, as opposed to try to think about the source of the news before they share it with others on social media. Another very dominant factor is pessimism. So people who tend to be more pessimistic are also the ones who tend to be more in a mindset which is characterized by learned helplessness. Because basically they feel that, like there's nothing they can do that's going to make a difference, so they might as well give up. So I would say at a psychological level, that there's research in psychology on positive psychology, on learned optimism, which is the opposite of learned helplessness, which can help. There's conditioning, there's training for people to learn to understand how to switch to a more mindful mode. Mindfulness training, for instance, instead of automatically conducting things online in certain ways, stopping and thinking about the consequences of your action, which is the system 2 way of thinking. So there are some psychological, factors, and also self-paced training programs that people can do to kind of help them to be in that more deliberative mode, especially when it comes to conducting transactions online. Thinking and stopping and considering the consequences of the behaviors before they jump into something that can then end up compromising.
Any input on privacy breaches on the kind of corporate or industry level?
Yeah, well, I think nowadays breaches don't really distinguish, right? There's all kinds of big and small corporations, tech companies, insurance companies, banking organizations that are bombarded by security threats. Denial of service attacks, viruses, Trojans. I think probably the healthcare industry and banking organizations are more vulnerable just because of the nature of the data that they manage. It's highly sensitive data, whether it's patient data for healthcare organizations or customer banking data for banks and so on, government data as well. So those would be the most, I would say, risky if they're threatened or compromised. But nowadays it's really as I said, like security threats happen to all kinds of organizations and from all directions. They come from other organizations, foreign, local. They come from individual hackers. So there's a lot that we still need to learn, whether at an individual level or also at government and corporate level, about how to protect our Canadians' information.
What do you think the future holds for Canadians and their private data?
I think that there are worrying signs as well as comforting signs as well. Worrying signs because obviously technology is only advancing at an exponential rate, and everything we do now is not only done by technology, but more and more so also being automated by algorithms. So, which means that the privacy and security problems can only become more complex as a lot of these transactions are automated. On the comforting side is as I think that governments and organizations are becoming more aware, more experienced, and more sensitive to the privacy-related problems. So sometimes companies have had to face scandals and problems and litigation like Facebook before they acted and to come up with better privacy mechanisms. Others, they've acted preemptively, like Apple, for instance. There's also in Europe very promising legislation, the GDPR, for instance, which gives a lot of control to people over their privacy. It gives them, for instance, things like the right to be forgotten, so that you can, delete information from your history on Google, something that you might have done 20 years ago, let's say. And a lot of these legislations are being adopted in Canada, in North America, and other countries in the world, or being in the process of coming into legislation. So I think it's hard to tell what the future will bring, but there's definitely privacy problems will be more complicated, but also there is much more appetite from top down. I'm not seeing as much appetite yet from bottom up, although there might be signs that this is the case. But as I said, we need both. We need top-down regulations, top-down preemptive actions by companies, as well as bottom-up deliberate actions by individuals so that they can protect their privacy and their security online.
I just want to thank you for your time, and we really, really appreciate it.